I'm Derek Desjardins, and welcome to the Lectory Perilous. In today's installment of my Enrichment Acceleration series, I'm going to be talking about second grade history and geography materials, especially those as recommended by the Core Knowledge Foundation. Now, I teach second through fifth grade, and I have done so for a long time. And increasingly every year, I do see that my kids come to me with a shallow reservoir of factual information, particularly in regards to scientific, historical, and geographical knowledge. And there are many factors creating this situation, not the least of which is an overfocus on skills-based teaching to the expense of domain-specific knowledge teaching at the primary grade levels. So if you're looking for supplementary materials for your kid, or even for yourself to kind of catch up and re-educate yourself, here are some topics that you might want to engage in. Now, somehow I end up always talking about world religions in my videos, but I guess that just shows how consequential and interwoven they are into all our discussions of history. And so today will be no different. I'm going to be talking about two major Indian religions, Hinduism and Buddhism. Now, of course, we don't get deep into the philosophical precepts of those religions with second graders or even with middle schoolers or high schoolers. At this point, all you want is exposure. Exposure with colorful pictures, engaging stories. So with that said, we have a nice little biography of the Buddha here by Susan Roth. Now, there's no one canonical story about the Buddha's life, but this one does a pretty nice job of rolling in some of the more commonly repeated elements about the story of the Buddha. A different approach is a fictional story. Now, I don't recommend a lot of fictional stories often in these E&A videos. I will later on when I start doing E&A videos for literature. But here's one that fits. It's called The Cat Who Went to Heaven. This is a Newbery Award winner. And this has quickly rocketed up to near the top of my list of all-time favorite children's books. It moved me, so maybe that it's going to tell you a little bit something about me more than the quality of the book, but I just absolutely loved this book. Sacred River. So if we're going to be talking about Hinduism, a nice way to anchor that initial conversation with students who have never been exposed to it is this book with big, beautiful color pictures of life along the Ganges and, various events and festivals that happen driven by Hinduism and the idea of the Ganges as a holy river. All right, ancient China. Now, listen, when we're talking about India and we're talking about China, we're talking about like massive ancient cultures, enduring and really not uniform, highly heterogeneous. So a better approach to teaching or introducing kids to these things are take really very, very splashy ideas that will engage them and get them curious either for their own study or be prepared for more in-depth conversations later on down the road. Now, what do you think of if you are not really highly educated about China and you talk about it for the first time? The Great Wall. Okay, so this is a beautiful book. I've always liked, black and white aesthetic like this. It's a little dark in certain places because the making of the Great Wall rolled in some pretty harsh treatment of the people building the wall itself. But this is a really well-written and attractive book. How about Japan? Now, the Core Knowledge Foundation keeps recommending these Young Discovery Library books to me. Now, first of all, they're hard to find. Second of all, they're overpriced for their used cost. And third of all, they are, they're just basically fact menus. My students love these. When I have them vote on what they want me to read to them, they will vote for books like this. So I've talked before about fact encyclopedias. Kids love them. And you know what? I loved them too when I was a kid. So I can't pretend that I don't understand why. I don't know, I guess I'm looking through it from more of an adult lens, or maybe I'm judging a book by its cover. Anyway, this one is called Japan, Land of Samurai and Robots. Here's one that kind of, another fictional story, although it reads like a true story. This one's called Bicycle Man, and this is about some American GIs who run into some students having some kind of like, not an academic festival, like a sports day, kind of a field day. And one of the GIs does tricks on the bicycle. It was a nice story. It was kind of a different approach to talking about Japan, but there's so many other things you could talk about with Japan. I don't know. See for yourself if you like it. This was not one of my favorites. Ancient Greece. Okay, so what are we talking about? Are we talking about the Minoans? Are we talking about the Mycenaeans? Are we talking about classical Athens? The same problem you run into with India and China, you run into with Greece. So what might be a good first exposure to Greece? Well, all of those would be good. Or you could start a little later on with Alexander the Great. And this book is by Demi, and it's got a real interesting art style. Like, the art is almost looks burnished, or you can see that right there. It's very nice. It's unusual, but it's a good tale of Alexander the Great. Doing post-classical Greece, the Hellenistic period, is an interesting choice, but Alexander the Great is one of those just colossal figures in world history, so not a bad time to introduce him. All right, let's shift over to American history, because while the things I've talked to up to this point are important and get you out of the little American shell that you might be in, or that your students might be in. At the end of the day, I'm interested in civics and citizenships and awareness of our own history. Now, a lot of my students don't know the Star-Spangled Banner. It doesn't help that we picked a very difficult national anthem to sing, but it is our national anthem, and students should know a lot about it. And also, you can roll in the War of 1812 at the same time. So this is called By the Dawn's Early Light by Stephen Kroll, and the illustrator is Dan Andreasen. And this is just another. Some of these books are just beautiful, plate-worthy books. The story of the Star-Spangled Banner. Not much more to say about it than that. Oh, we have a little bit of sheet music at the end for those of you who can play. I can't. I certainly cannot. Here's another one about the Star-Spangled Banner. This one is by Peter Spear, but what I really like about this one is that the individual lines are illustrated. So the idea of a rampart, or bombs bursting in air, this is a tough idea for students to get their heads around. Well, what does that really mean? And we go beyond the more commonly sung verses and go deeper into the anthem as well. And for those of you who want to do some additional research on your own, they've got some cool historical knowledge back here. I do get my books used, so that one's highlighted. And then, what is it? A vexillopher? Someone who's interested in, or maybe I'm just doing some Latin here. Vexologist? Vexillologist? I'll have to look that one up. Okay. We're going to talk a little bit about westward expansion this year in second grade. We have the amazing, impossible Erie Canal. I wanted so much to love this book because the idea of it, the engineering aspect of it, and the tie-in to the opening of the West, I found really interesting. And I can't deny it's an attractive book. And it's just jammed full of information. In fact, it might be too jammed full of information because I don't know how you would use this with kids. I could see using this with maybe older kids who are predisposed to engineering or specifically interested in this kind of history. But it does go into some pretty cool detail about how locks work. But all in all, the story of the making and the opening of the canal, I don't know why. I didn't find it very compelling myself. See for yourself. Okay, westward movement. Now, after reading these books, I guess I took for granted just how absolutely courageous and creative the settlers who moved west were with these wagon trains into harsh territory. And these two books, Going West and Wagon Wheels, I mean, they will restore your faith in the ability of humans to overcome. I mean, the story of Wagon Wheels, I think it's based on a true story. I don't know how historically accurate it is, but it just kind of mind-blowing what some of these children were expected to do. So I do really highly recommend both of these books. Going West is by Jean Van Leeuwen. I've run across her a few times now. The art is sufficient. Wagon Wheels, this is an all I can read book, level 3. So it says for grades 2 to 4, but it's not particularly difficult. But the story itself, man alive. Yeah. Native Americans. Okay. I've said it before in this video twice already. I mean, we're talking about an extremely diverse, ancient group of people. So how do you talk about Native Americans? So really, anything I'm talking about today is just going to be a sampler, and hopefully gets kids engaged and interested in perhaps doing some research on their own or taking out more books on their own, because you can't provide all the materials for kids. Ultimately, they are going to have to become advocates for their own education. And this is one of the most difficult things as a teacher, is to try to instill that self-advocacy and that drive and that conscientiousness towards learning. Now this book, this is a Caldecott Medal winner by Paul Goebel, The Girl Who Loved Horses. Now this is just a knockout book in terms of being gorgeous. I mean, the artwork is great. The story is good. I mean, it's a simplistic story, but it's really very evocative. The Girl Who Loved Wild Horses. I think there's a few by this author kind of in a similar vein, but different regions of the Americas. All right, so a secular saint that we're going to be talking about this year, Abraham Lincoln. Of course, students all hear about Abraham Lincoln at some point, and as they should. So I'm not really presenting any information that your kids are not going to be learning about, but again, my idea is they can learn about it earlier. There's no need to wait until 4th or 5th grade before you talk about Abraham Lincoln. And so we have here the story about the Gettysburg Address. And here is who is this by? It's called Just a Few Words, Mr. Lincoln. And it's by Jean Fritz, of course. Jean Fritz, she has her thumbprint on basically everything about history for children. Now this is Me, Abraham Lincoln, and this is a landmark book. Okay, here's what I learned about landmark books. They're awesome. If you run across a landmark book, get it, use it, read it. And I've also found that they can be at varying levels of reading difficulty. I have one on the Egyptian pharaohs, and man, I learned a lot from that book. These are really well written. They get very talented writers to write for them. So I don't know where they've been all my life or if I've read some along the way, but I do intend to go back and read a lot of landmark books. I cannot recommend this series enough. Okay, how about immigration? If you want to talk about, along with westward expansion, some really, really brave people, people who went through the waves of immigration to our country. And I myself am a first generation American. I am a child of immigrants. And I think often about the endless respect I have for the journey of my parents and the hardships they had to endure and the bravery they needed to come here and make it in the United States. So here's Betsy Maestro, another one like Jean Fritz. When you run across her, read her stuff. She does really good things. And we have mainly a focus on Ellis Island here. Okay, and the journeys across the sea these people endured, the hardship of the conditions. I just respect to them. Statue of Liberty. So what greeted a lot of the immigrants coming in, the Statue of Liberty, an American icon, something you need to know something about, much like the Star-Spangled Banner and Mount Rushmore, so on and so forth. And this is a very nice telling of, Betsy and Giulio Maestro again. I think it's Maestro. That's how it's spelled. So, really nicely done book here. The story of the Statue of Liberty. The following 3 books are 3 different cultural takes on the immigration story. We have Molly's Pilgrim, and this is, I believe, a Russian Jewish girl. This is a fictionalized account of her story. A really nice story. It's got that kind of Judy Blume fit to it, where there's like Mean Girls in it. And I kind of wanted the Mean Girls to get theirs at the end, so they didn't. But in any case, I never got over Blubber by Judy Blume. The girls were so mean in that book. Every time I think about that book, I'm like, wow, that's a really mean book. Anyway, Clara's New World. So this is a Swedish immigrant. And I found the story pretty interesting, especially living in the Midwest and just to the north of us, up in Wisconsin, the number of Scandinavian immigrants that made their way up there. So this is a real interesting story. And then here is about Vietnamese immigration. And I learned some things. This is mainly, should get this one for the artwork. The story's okay, not particularly interesting. I did learn a little bit of some interesting factoids about the River of Perfumes. I think it's the city of Hue. It's an okay story. All right, who else? How about Martin Luther King Jr.? Now this has nothing to do with immigration per se or westward expansion, but this is probably a good year to start talking a little bit about some rights movements, and of course maybe the most important rights movement of all, the civil rights movement. Happy birthday, Martin Luther King. Very nice story. It almost looks like kind of woodblock printing. It's got that kind of etched look to it. And this is a nice story of Martin Luther King's background and how important his work was. Now, you can probably see just looking through a video, even without being able to read the words. Some books are very text heavy, some books are not, but there is a good amount of research that read alouds do help students with comprehension. So don't think a child is ever too old to be read to. Second grade, we probably intuitively know that we can read to second graders, but I read to my third, fourth, and fifth graders. And I think if I had sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth graders, I would be reading to them as well, because there's something about hearing an expert reader, the intonation, the prosody, the fluency, and the ability to just kind of use words in their correct context, and also to diverge and take tangential paths of conversation that are very important. With that said, this is probably an independent read, no problem for a kid, and an important story. So there you have it. That's my second grade enrichment and acceleration video, and I will now be moving up into that very important transition year of third grade, in which little adults are starting to be made. And that will be next time, whenever next time rolls around. So until then, Dokendo Discator.